Lynn, yesterday you appeared on the Alex Jones show and gave an interview there in which you unequivocally stated exactly what you've stated tonight, that the time has come for the immediate removal from office of Barack Obama. What you said there was that Obama has to be thrown out of office immediately, and there's every reason to do so preemptively, not only for his sake, but for the sake of the people of the United States. And you said if his policies, as he just put the new stages into operation, if that policy is allowed, you're going to see open Hitler-style genocide applied to a large section of the U.S. population who are considered not fit to survive, not fit to live, just like Hitler, lives unworthy to be lived. And in that interview, you said that across the nation, we're seeing an explosion in this determination, what you called a rising tide of determination to throw this guy out of office. That's the mood out there, and it's increasing at a rapid rate. Now, I just wanted to cite two examples of that. First of all, earlier this week, a very high-level elected official, the lieutenant governor of Texas, a man named David Dewhurst, surprised a lot of people by openly calling for Obama's impeachment. He said he had a number of reasons which rose to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. Obama's blatant disregard for federal law, including ignoring federal drug laws, stating his open intention to work around the United States Congress in violation of the U.S. Constitution. But what Dewhurst said he was most concerned about is Benghazi. And he said all the national news reported that there was a live video stream into the White House Situation Room, and not mobilizing some response to protect the ambassador and those three Americans is just outrageous to me. He said that happens to be my view, that the man has committed crimes that do not warrant his staying in office. Now, in addition to the lieutenant governor of Texas, we've also seen the somewhat popular radio show host Glenn Beck, who just recently joined in, finally, in calling for Obama's impeachment. And he said, for the very first time in my career, I personally am calling for the impeachment of the President of the United States. He's arming known terrorists in Syria. And if they are saying, we're going to arm al-Qaeda, and yes, we know that these arms are going to fall into the hands of al-Qaeda, Beck said, if that's not an impeachable offense, I don't know what an impeachable offense is. You're arming and aiding the enemies of the United States. I believe it is impeachable. I believe it is treason. And the president knows that it is against the law. So I think it's clear that there is indeed, as you said, Lynn, yesterday, a rising tide of determination in the United States to throw this president out of office. And what you said yesterday is that this is a president who's practically sitting there waiting for his own Nuremberg tribunal. So you raised the question on the Alex Jones show, are we going to wait for a bloody dictatorship in this country, or are we going to mobilize to throw him out of office now? What, in your opinion, needs to be said to the people who are in the position to do that to happen immediately?
There's a certain time where silence speaks wonders. Because when you take the list of crimes which this president has committed against the United States and against the people of the world, and the greater crimes he's trying to spread now, for example, they're trying to spread war against China, which is already there, the Korean pressure from the United States on Korea, the same way. So you see that this thing that's been done, the crushing and destruction of Western and Central Europe, the genocide, virtual genocide against Greece in particular, the threats against other nations, Spain, Portugal, and so forth, all coming from this same source of policy, the Queen and her Dutch relative. And who are, by the way, these were the original sponsors together with Bush, the Bush family. Prescott was a key author. Not only did he support and defend Hitler and in office, he did that. But his whole crew of allies did, from inside the United States and Britain. The same thing has been going on again. They have destroyed the sovereignty of the nations of Western and Central Europe. They have destroyed that sovereignty. And it started because a French president, who was no damn good, actually, was a key in that instrument. But it was done by whom? By George H.W. Bush, then a president of the United States, and then vice president as well, in this and that crew. They did it. So you've got the Bush family, which has a Hitler pedigree, to their grandfather, original grandfather, now Prescott Bush, a Hitler supporter. You'll find that all around all the people who that particular Wall Street interest were all the same thing. So the time has come that the question is, are we going to have a human species? Now, there's one aspect of this thing you've got to take into mind. The level of warfare today is thermonuclear warfare. We have a number of nations who are on the target list of the Obama and his allies, which include Russia and China and possibly India and other countries. Any war which occurs among this circle of nations, of adversaries, would be a thermonuclear war. A thermonuclear war would be the probable extinction of the human species, because merely going to the level of warfare and mobilization and weaponry, to do that, to conduct such warfare successfully, or supposedly, would actually cause reactions throughout the planet, which would be the extinction of the human species. There is no moral excuse. There's no justification in view of Obama's role in this complex and his advocacies in this complex. There is no basis in humanity for continue to further extend the presidency of the United States into the paws of Obama.
Well, let me ask a follow-up question on that and give some very significant background, which I think is important for people to know. Let me just start by saying on June 24th, 2009, the LaRouche movement submitted testimony to the United States Congress titled, "Why the Obama Health Plan Must Be Scrapped." That written testimony began by saying, "We have determined that the fundamental premises of this program, as represented by OMB Chief Peter Orszag, his health advisor Ezekiel Emanuel, and the President himself, are identical to those which underlay the genocidal program for eliminating the unrehabilitatable sick in the Hitler regime. There can be no compromise with the premises of this program. If it is successful, it will lead to genocide, and not only in healthcare, since OMB Chief Orszag has already announced that after healthcare, he intends to reform, i.e. slash, Social Security next." The testimony goes on to cite the origins of Hitler's genocide program, which started with a memo written by Hitler personally on October of 1939 titled, "The Destruction of Lives Unworthy of Life," in which he declares that Reichsleiter Böhler and Dr. Brandt are charged with the responsibility for expanding the authority of physicians to be designated by name to the end that patients considered incurable, according to the best available human judgment of their state of health, can be accorded a mercy death. And as a result of that memo, a working group for sanatoriums and nursing homes was set up at 4 Tiergartenstrasse in Berlin. And they prepared a questionnaire to categorize the specific individuals who would be targeted for these so-called mercy deaths. The 4 categories were: 1, patients who suffered from diseases which rendered them unemployable, including schizophrenia, epilepsy, senility, paralysis, feeble-mindedness, and the like. 2, patients who had been institutionalized for at least 5 years. 3, patients who are criminally insane. And 4, non-Germans. According to this questionnaire, which was circulated to all the hospitals in Germany, an independent board of experts then reviewed each case and put a dash mark or an X, signifying whether the patient lived or died. Now, Dr. Leo Alexander, who was the chief medical advisor to the United States Chief Counsel for War Crimes during the Nazi doctors' trial in the Nuremberg tribunals, wrote the following in the New England Journal of Medicine after the Nuremberg trials concluded. He said, "Whatever proportions these crimes finally assumed, it became evident to all who investigated them that they had started from small beginnings. The beginnings at first were merely a subtle shift in emphasis in the basic attitude of the physicians. It started with the acceptance of the attitude, which is basic in the euthanasia movement, that there is such a thing as a life not worthy to be lived. This attitude in its early stages concerned itself merely with the severely and chronically sick. Gradually, the sphere of those to be included in this category was enlarged to encompass the socially unproductive, the ideologically unwanted, and finally, all non-Aryans. But it is important to realize that the infinitely small wedge-in lever from which this entire trend of mind received its impetus was the attitude towards the non-rehabilitatable sick. Now, Lynn, when you first identified Obamacare as a carbon copy of Hitler's T4 back in 2009 and put the Hitler mustache on Obama, leading Democrats went hysterical and screamed that your warnings were extreme, were over the top. But just this past week, we've received reports that there's been a sudden change in attitude among certain layers of the Democratic Party leadership, who are now beginning to realize that you were right all along, and that your warnings about the killer fascist tendency of this president are now being proven totally correct. So, in light of that change, I wanted to invite you to elaborate on this in the context that we find ourselves in now.
What we have is a global phenomenon, this horror show, which has destroyed the nations of Western and Central Europe already. They no longer have freedom, any freedom to speak of, so to speak. They're under management by the joint Dutch-British imperial system. And that whole center of Europe, central part of Europe, is now being butchered, plainly butchered. The thing is now being spread in terms of the Obama administration's role in the attempt to start a war against China. And this is very serious, an attempted war against China, where Korea refused to deal with Obama's administration on the basis of this, that they would not tolerate this attempt to start a war using Korea against China. So we're in the same kind of thing now. And on top of that, there is no possibility now, as long as Obama is not removed from office, for cause, elementary cause. If he's not removed from office, then those who do not work to remove him from office are guilty. They're guilty of the same crime as Adolf Hitler because they condone it. Because that's what the danger was with the Germans. The German people began to give in to Hitler. They're giving in to Hitler even before the war was the same kind of crime. It was a crime against humanity, which had already started in 1939, openly. And it was backed by Prescott Bush, who was the person who first intervened to allow Hitler to become the Chancellor of Germany, and who in effect made him and supported him, together with other pro-Nazi people in the British system and in the Bush family's system too. So the Bush family, since that time, including George H.W. Bush, including Bush, and this operation is the same criminal tendency, but in a more or less diluted form or disguised form. But that's what the policy is. And the Bush family's role in this is prominent all the way through. It is a Bush family problem, especially the family of Prescott Bush. And that's the problem. Do we in the United States have a sense of honor which refuses to deal justly with our own people for the sake of giving opportunities to that Bush family? No, and also remember, there's another crime. 9/11. 9/11, even though they have all these special protocols around to try to deny the truth, 9/11 was a product of the British monarchy, the Saudi kingdom, including the leading Saudi figure right now, who is involved in that. They did 9/11. And then the Bush family went ahead and pushed through a cover-up of 9/11, when in point of fact it was the Saudi leader who had been, at that point, was the ambassador to the United States. This Saudi leader personally is involved in setting up 9/11, personally. And he's now the head of the, still ahead of the Arabian system. So that's what the problem is. Therefore, what you see is a stink of corruption permeating our own institutions of government through these mechanisms. And the time has come, we will not save the United States. And anyone who does not move these guys out is actually implicitly condoning treason against the United States, treason against the human species as well. Because the intention here is global. We have now 7 billion people on this planet, estimated. And the Queen of England, together with her Dutch accomplices, has set forth a policy for reduction of the human population as rapidly as possible from 7 billion people to 1 or less. That is the policy of the Queen of England. That is the policy of the Dutch system. The Dutch were actually much ahead of their British cousins in terms of this kind of genocide. And that's where we stand. We are at the point where anyone who raises funny questions about my charges against Obama and his predecessors and the Bushes is wrong. And their wrongness in the fact that they have great influence in the nation means that their wrongness, it borders into clearly criminal intentions.